The salad fork was in my right hand, halfway to its place on the linen napkin, when Celeste cleared her throat like a warning bell. "No, Joanna," she said, loud enough for Veronica to hear from the next room. "It goes on the left. Honestly, it's not that complicated." I froze. Not because I didn't know where it belonged. I'd hosted more formal dinners than she'd likely ever attended, but because of her tone. Polished. Patronizing. The kind that tells you the correction isn't about silverware at all. Veronica's voice floated in from the living room. "Give her a break, darling. She's from a different generation. Things were simpler back then." They both laughed. A short, synchronized sound like clinking glasses, brittle and hollow. I adjusted the fork, quietly, carefully. I wasn't about to start something an hour before Leighton's celebration dinner. Still, I felt my cheeks flush. And not from the warmth of the kitchen. Celeste leaned in once the laughter died down, her voice low, cutting. "Just remember, you're a guest tonight, not the matriarch." She didn't wait for a reply. She turned away in her satin blouse, already forgetting I was still holding the serving spoons she'd asked me to polish. I stood there, looking around the house I'd helped them buy, the chairs I'd helped pick out, the fireplace I'd painted by hand the summer they were traveling abroad, the home that no longer held a single photograph of me. Veronica entered with a fresh bottle of wine and scanned the table with theatrical approval. "Much better. Everything has its proper place now." I didn't answer. I placed the spoons beside the salad bowl, careful not to clink them too hard. I knew better than to make noise in someone else's home. Except, this wasn't someone else's. Not really. And yet, standing there, I had never felt more out of place in my life. I heard the front door creak open. More laughter followed. Celeste's voice grew louder as she welcomed the guests. I smoothed the fabric of my dress and walked into the dining room, trying to remember why I still tried at all. The candles flickered as the wine flowed, laughter swirling around the table like perfume. I sat between Veronica and a partner from Leighton's firm, my cloth napkin folded perfectly across my lap, my smile practiced and still. "So, Joanna," the partner's wife asked kindly, "what do you do with your time these days?" I brightened a little. "I've been volunteering at the literacy center downtown. I work with adult students, some of them grandparents learning to read for the first time." Veronica snorted softly, just loud enough to draw attention. "How quaint," she said, reaching for her glass. "Still playing teacher." "I see." I opened my mouth, then closed it. The woman across from me blinked, visibly confused by the shift in tone. "It's actually very fulfilling," I said quietly. "One of my students just read her first full chapter book last week. She's 67. Celeste leaned forward, placing her manicured hand over her husband's. "Isn't that sweet?" she said, voice sweet but sharp. "But speaking of achievements, did you know Leighton just got offered the deputy division lead? He's only 34. Chairs shifted as everyone turned to Leighton, applause following like reflex. He nodded, modestly, and glanced down at his plate. He hadn't said a word all evening. I took a sip of water, suddenly parched. As the conversation steered back toward corporate mergers and defense contracts, my story had been swallowed whole, digested, and discarded without ceremony. When the lemon tart was passed around, I quietly excused myself, standing slowly to avoid drawing attention. No one stopped me. In the kitchen, I leaned against the counter, gripping the edge like it might keep me upright. My eyes stung. I told myself it was the onions I'd helped Celeste slice earlier. Told myself a lot of things. From the dining room, Veronica's laugh rang out again, followed by Celeste's cooler, controlled amusement. Through the doorway, I could see Leighton raise his glass, offering a toast I couldn't hear. He never once looked toward the kitchen. I dabbed my eyes with a corner of paper towel and straightened my spine. My breath caught as I turned and spotted something near the back door. The quilt, still balled up in a garbage bag. I hadn't brought it up yet. Not yet, but soon. The first time I felt myself slipping away, it was over wallpaper. Celeste had insisted on neutral tones, clean lines. Nothing too sentimental. I'd suggested a pale blue floral for the guest room. Something soft and familiar. She blinked at me like I'd spoken another language. 2 days later, the room was painted beige. That same week, I came home to find the cedar chest from my parents' attic shoved into the garage. Sealed with packing tape. A yellow sticky note labeled it seasonal. It wasn't. It had been the same pattern ever since the wedding, 3 months after they married. I sold my condo and offered them part of the down payment for this house. Leighton said it made sense, a shared investment. I didn't mind. I wanted to help. I told myself this was what family did, but somewhere between the first mortgage meeting and the third dinner party, I wasn't invited to. My name stopped being included. My opinion, unasked. My furniture, dated. My photographs, quietly removed from the shelves and never put back up. I remembered asking just once, if they could leave the oak rocking chair by the window in the reading nook. Celeste smiled politely and said, "It really doesn't match the aesthetic." The chair disappeared the next day. Leighton never mentioned it. Just like he didn't mention when the front door code changed without telling me. Just like he didn't ask when my wedding china was packed into the attic to make room for Veronica's curated glassware. I didn't push. I didn't want to seem ungrateful. After all, I was living with them while waiting for my small rental to be ready. At least, that was the plan. The plan kept stretching. The move kept postponing. Until one day, I realized I hadn't looked for a place in months. I was waiting for what? I wasn't sure anymore. I remembered what my husband used to say when people showed their worst sides in quiet ways. People show their character, he told me once. When they think no one is watching. I was watching now, and they had no idea. I found it by accident, tucked behind the recycling bins in the mudroom, my grandmother's quilt. Stuffed into a black garbage bag like it was kitchen waste. The pattern was unmistakable. Even through the thin, plastic, faded rose calicos stitched into tiny stars. Worn soft from decades of hands that held more than fabric. I crouched down slowly, pried the bag open, and brushed my fingers across one corner. The fabric was cool, but the rage it sparked was not. "What is this doing out here?" I asked, carrying it into the hallway like a wounded animal. Veronica looked up from the entryway mirror where she was adjusting her scarf. "Oh, that old thing," she said lightly. "It was taking up space in the linen cabinet. I thought the housekeeper had tossed it days ago." My throat tightened. That quilt was made by my grandmother. Every stitch is by hand. Celeste appeared at the top of the stairs, holding a tray of stemware. "Honestly, Joanna, it's just clutter. We're trying to keep the house streamlined." It was folded in the guest room closet. "Exactly. A closet. Not a museum," she said, descending slowly, her heels tapping out something final. "This isn't your home anymore. Try to remember that." She brushed past me toward the kitchen. I stood there in the hallway, quilt in my arms, the words echoing louder than they'd been spoken. "Not your home anymore. Not even yours enough for a memory to survive in it." I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I carried the bag upstairs, into the small guest room with no pictures, no traces of who I'd been. I laid the quilt on the bed and smoothed it gently, like I was trying to press my presence back into the fibers. I sat there for a long while, hands resting on my lap, the silence around me as heavy as the weight on my chest. When I finally rose to close the door, I heard voices downstairs. Veronica, Celeste, and someone else just arriving, Leighton. I pressed my hand to the quilt one last time and went down to greet my son. Leighton stepped through the door with a sharp nod and a tired smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Sorry I'm late," he said, loosening his tie as he glanced around the room. Traffic was a mess coming off base. Celeste greeted him with a quick kiss on the cheek and a drink already in hand. Veronica praised his punctuality, as if the last hour hadn't been spent dismantling my presence in the house. I stood near the edge of the room, waiting for a quiet moment that never came. He sank into the armchair beside the fireplace, undoing the top button of his collar like it weighed more than his medals ever did. I approached slowly, cautiously. "Leighton, can I talk to you for a moment?" He looked up, distracted. "Can it wait? It's been a long day." I smiled gently. "I know. I've been feeling like maybe I'm not really wanted here anymore." He exhaled through his nose, a short breath that passed for patience. "Mom, not now. Please." I nodded, swallowing the ache. He didn't see it, the effort it took not to press further. Not to ask why he hadn't noticed the quilt, or the missing photos, or the way his wife looked at me like a guest she'd forgotten to uninvite. "Sure," I said softly. "Later." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Thanks. I just need to get through tonight without drama. There's a lot riding on this." I watched him for a moment, trying to find the boy who used to chase lightning bugs across the backyard in muddy boots, the one who once promised to build me a house with a sunroom and no stairs because you'll be old one day. "Mom, and I'll take care of you." Now here he was grown, decorated, burdened, and I couldn't tell if I'd lost him to time or to someone else's idea of who he should be. As he stood to join the guests, I caught sight of his duffel bag by the door, half unzipped. His army tag glinted under the hallway light. He hadn't unpacked, and something told me he wasn't planning to. The dining room glowed with candlelight, the table dressed in white linen and wine glasses that caught reflections like mirrors. Leighton sat at the head, his promotion announced with pride by Celeste, who beamed like it was her accomplishment. Guests from his command, his firm, and a few of Celeste's polished acquaintances filled the seats around us. Laughter smooth and easy. Someone asked how Leighton had developed such calm under pressure, and I smiled softly. When he was 10, he used to sit on the roof during storms, said he liked watching the lightning. I think he learned calm from thunder. A few chuckles followed, polite, indulgent. Then Celeste's voice cut in. "Mom, maybe let Leighton tell his own stories tonight." The room quieted, the moment shrinking. I started to reply, but she waved her hand lightly. "I just mean, it's a professional event. Let's keep it focused." Veronica chimed in with her usual sugar-laced venom. "She means, darling, that nostalgia doesn't quite match the champagne." A ripple of laughter moved across the table. I looked toward Leighton. He didn't say anything. He didn't look at me. He swirled the drink in his glass and cleared his throat. I nodded slowly and lowered my eyes to my plate. The fork in my hand trembled. I set it down. After dessert, the speeches began. A colleague praised Leighton's leadership. Another praised Celeste's unwavering support. Then someone lifted a glass and toasted the entire family. Clearly, a house full of strength. Celeste laughed and leaned into the spotlight. "Well, not always," she said, eyes flicking to me. "We've had some growing pains, haven't we, Joanna?" The table turned toward me, uncertain. I tried to smile, but it felt wrong on my face. "I'm not invisible," I said. It came out smaller than I meant it to, but it was the truth. Celeste didn't miss a beat. "No one said you were invisible," she replied, sweet and sharp, just not relevant. The silence that followed was deeper than insult. It was confirmation. I stood up, napkin falling to the floor. My chair scraped against the hardwood. I didn't look at Leighton this time. I didn't need to. I'd memorized the shape of his silence. I walked out of the dining room and into the kitchen, where the last light flickered under the cabinet. I reached for the kettle, hands steady now, heart burning low and controlled. I didn't cry. I poured the water, stirred the tea, and waited. Not for comfort, not for apology, for the sound that always came next, the sound of boots on marble. I sat on the edge of the kitchen chair, the steam from my tea curling around my face, my cheeks still warm and damp, through the archway. I could see Celeste raising her glass again, laughing with Veronica like nothing had happened, like I wasn't still sitting in the house I helped them buy, aching from the latest slice of their affection. Turned blade, my hands curled around the mug. I didn't sip. I didn't speak. Then I heard it dull and unmistakable. Boots on the marble floor. Slow, heavy, intentional. The sound turned heads. Chairs shifted. Conversation halted. Leighton stood in the entryway. Back straight, dressed in full uniform, his jacket crisp. Name tag gleaming. The insignia on his chest catching the light. And behind him, flanking his shoulders like shadows, Detective Meyer. Plain clothed, but unmistakably armed. And another officer I didn't recognize. Still in fatigues. No one moved. Leighton's eyes scanned the room. Not the furniture. Not the wine glasses. Not even the stunned expressions. He looked at me first, his mother. My face. My posture. The smallness of where I sat. Then, slowly, he turned to Celeste. "Everyone out," he said, voice low but sharp, except Veronica. Celeste and my mother. The guests froze. One of the officers stepped forward. "You heard him," he said calmly. "Please exit the house immediately. No shouting, no chaos, just quiet panic and the shuffling of expensive shoes on polished floors." Within minutes, the room had emptied, leaving only the four of us and the weight of something long overdue. Celeste's smile had vanished. Veronica clutched the back of her chair like it might steady her. I didn't stand. I didn't need to. Leighton walked into the room. Every step measured. He stopped beside my chair, his hand resting lightly on my shoulder. Not ownership, not comfort, recognition. He turned back to Celeste. "You crossed a line tonight," he said. "And it's not the first time." Celeste opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Detective Meyer stepped forward, a folder in his hand. And I knew the night wasn't over yet. Not by a long shot. Detective Meyer placed the folder on the dining table like it was made of glass. No one reached for it. Leighton stood still, his voice steady, clipped in a way I hadn't heard since before he left for his second deployment. I installed cameras in the guest wing, the kitchen, and the back hallway 3 weeks ago, he said. Audio. 2. Motion activated. Meyer and I reviewed the footage. Celeste's jaw tensed. Veronica blinked like someone trying to wake up from the wrong dream. "Why would you do that?" Celeste asked, her voice sharp but shaking. "Because I stopped recognizing my own house. Because I started seeing the changes in my mother's face every time I came home." Leighton replied. So I started listening. Meyer opened the folder. Inside, timestamps, transcripts, printed stills, verbal taunts from Veronica, dismissive jabs from Celeste. My voice, too softer, hesitant, apologizing more than speaking. "She's not family. She's furniture." Veronica's voice on the recording said, "I keep hoping she'll leave on her own." Celeste's voice replied. Leighton didn't look away from his wife. "You said things you didn't think I'd hear, but I heard all of it." Celeste tried to speak, but he raised a hand. "Not yet." Meyer cleared his throat. "We also have statements from the housekeeper and 2 former neighbors. Psychological manipulation, financial dependency, coercive control." I wasn't blind, Leighton said. Quieter now. I was gathering proof. He turned to me then, just briefly, long enough to say with his eyes what he hadn't been able to say for months. I needed to be sure. I didn't nod. I didn't cry. I just breathed. Veronica sat down slowly, her fingers trembling against the stem of her wine glass. Celeste stared at the folder, then at Leighton, her face paling. You don't know what this will do to our lives, she said. I know exactly what it'll do. Leighton replied, and it's long overdue. I stood slowly, not because I was afraid, but because I wanted them to see it, every inch of the woman they'd tried to shrink. I gave you 3 years of grace, I said, my voice steady. 3 years of folding myself smaller, of calling your cruelty misunderstanding, of naming exile transition. But don't confuse my silence for ignorance. Celeste blinked. Veronica's lips parted, but no words came. You boxed up my memories, threw away my history, and stripped this house of anything that looked like me. But what you didn't do, what you couldn't do, was erase the woman who carried a son through combat tours and cancer scares, who buried a husband with more dignity than you've shown in your entire lives. I looked at Celeste. You didn't break me. You just revealed yourself. That's not power. That's exposure. Her mouth opened to respond, but nothing followed. Then to Veronica, you call yourself family. But you watched me disappear and poured wine over the silence. You didn't protect your daughter. You modeled her. Leighton didn't speak. He didn't need to. He stood still beside me, letting the air fill with everything I had never said. I'm leaving this house, I said finally, but I'm not leaving in shame. I'm leaving free. Veronica reached for something, an apology, a defense, but found nothing. Celeste sat frozen, her fingers clenched in her lap, and I walked past them, chin high, already on my way upstairs to pack. Leighton met me at the bottom of the stairs without a word. My suitcase was already zipped. I hadn't needed to think about what to take. Most of what mattered had already been taken. He took the bag from my hand without asking and wheeled it to the car. As I reached the door, I saw it, the quilt, folded neatly, resting across the back seat like a welcome. We didn't speak as he drove. The quiet was thick, but not uncomfortable, just full. It wasn't until we turned onto the main road, the house shrinking behind us, that he spoke. I should have listened sooner. I looked at him, his hands steady on the wheel, his jaw tight with something heavier than regret. You just did it in your way, I said, the way you were trained to. Quiet, precise. He nodded once. The smallest movement doesn't make it right. No, I said softly, but it makes it honest. The quilt shifted slightly on the seat as we hit a bump. I reached back, smoothed it with one hand, and left it there between us, soft, worn, strong. Neither of us spoke for the rest of the drive. We didn't need to. The wind was softer up here, the kind that rustled trees without shaking them. I'd found the little craftsman house by accident, tucked near the edge of the hills, windows that caught the morning sun, and a porch just wide enough for 2 chairs and a quiet kind of peace. The quilt hung framed in my reading room now, stretched and preserved behind glass, its faded fabric glowing in the afternoon light. I told the story of it often at the shelter, how it had once been mistaken for trash, how it had outlasted the people who tried to erase it. Most days, I helped other women find their way through the silence. I sat beside them as they named things out loud for the first time. I offered what I'd once needed: presence, not pity. One evening, just after dusk, Leighton knocked. He held a brown bag of takeout in one hand and something wrapped in paper in the other. I didn't want to call ahead. He said, "Didn't want you to feel obligated. You never have to knock," I said, stepping aside to let him in. Over dinner, he handed me the wrapped item. Inside was a small wooden plaque, hand-carved. "You were always my home." I traced the lettering with my thumb and looked at him. The porch light flickered on outside. I hadn't touched the switch. He had.